we didn't get enough stuff to get feedback. So we're continuing the working group last call. There's going to be a presentation on it at this meeting. Please provide feedback. Prive step 2 and padding profiles are on the agenda for today. They're related drafts.
Yep.
Event presentations.
Yep.
And then how are we going to introduce Terry?
Right after that, I figured. This is AD.
AD.
Yes. The great and glorious.
Wondrous. Great.
It's just a little spooky sitting there seeing Joel right in the front row. It's just sort of like, it's like, wait, did I wake up in DNS again?
So I made some edits to Insect again.
Oh yes, I know. And there's
which I don't know.
And there's a bunch of people like saying, "Well, I don't know about this, and you got to change it." And it's like, "Oh, okay, guys, you got to sort this out here."
Yeah.
What was that? Oh, I know.
I'll bitch later about that.
We need to unblock that.
Yeah.
Yes. I know. I think that whole idea thing just sort of, people they're too wound up in sort of the political. Yeah, it's just like.
Anyway, grumble.
No, I think actually that's the correct statement. The more fucked up it is, and yeah, it's time to act. So. Yeah.
So. Alrighty, everyone. We're going to be starting real soon now. So please find seats, sit down, shut up, pay attention, etc. Wow. Look, I could be like all authoritative and stuff when I've got a microphone.
Yeah.
And nobody listens.
And nobody listens. Oh, Alexander's here. Good to see you again. You're done traveling the world, I guess.
All right, sit down,
Yeah.
Shut up. Still nobody listens. Oh, well.
I thought when I saw you in Prague, you were traveling, you're on some world tour or something like that. Okay, and you're done with that. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so hello, everyone. Welcome to DPRIVE. We got the short straw, and so it's Friday afternoon. So many of us, I lie, it's Friday morning. Many of us are somewhat tired and loopy, but oh well, we'll see how this goes. Next slide. So, as I said, welcome to DPRIVE. Tim Warren, Dan York has nicely agreed to be the Jabber Scribe. Is Dan actually in the room? Dan, thank you, sir. The Jabber Scribe gets priority mic access. So, if there's a line, the Jabber Scribe can cut in front. Thank you. Suzanne says she will do minutes. Thank you, Suzanne. If you're using Etherpad, please save it to somewhere else every now and then, because Etherpad has a tendency to eat notes every now and then. Next, note well. Here is the note well. Please note it well. Presumably by now you've seen this many times. It says all sorts of important things. I'm not going to interpret them. This is between you and your lawyer / rabbi / priest / whatever. Please make sure that you understand what it means. It's important. Blue sheets. The blue sheets are busy circulating somewhere. If you have not signed the blue sheets yet, please sign the blue sheets. Who has the blue sheets? Can you? Okay, they're all the way towards the back of the room. Eventually they'll come forward. Please sign them. This is our agenda. It is nice and short. Does anybody have any agenda bashing? Are you expecting to present and aren't listed? Or more worryingly, are you listed and you don't know that you're presenting? Okay, well, there we go then. A quick status update. These are the RFCs which we've published so far. The DPRIVE DNS over DTLS document has been submitted to the IESG. It's on the December 15th telechat. Hopefully it goes well. The Tls Profiles document. The working group last call for this ended October 21st. Unfortunately, we did not get enough feedback to actually call it. This will be presented today. So hopefully people will, actually know what it says and will care. But please go off and actually read the document. Please provide feedback. There will be some more cajoling going on, during/after the presentation. We have two related drafts, the padding profiles draft and the phase 2 or step 2 work. They'll be presented as well. And then we're going to have to, discuss what we're actually doing in phase 2 of DPRIVE. Before we get into presentations, our wondrous, great and illustrious AD has something to say. Hopefully we managed to embarrass him enough with that.
Yeah, boss.
I don't know who that AD is, but you got me instead. So on Sunday, I don't know whether you're aware, there is a Edu team session on DNS privacy. So I'm here to publicly thank Sarah Dickinson for freely giving her own time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sarah. The efforts like this are really great for the IETF and more importantly, really great for DPRIVE and getting the knowledge sharing out there and happening. Thank you.
And yeah, that was recorded. So if people want to watch it, it's definitely worth watching. It also makes a really good thing if you want to sort of introduce others to the work that's going on here without spending all of your time talking. Sarah spent her time talking. So without further ado, presentations. Up first, we have, where's the agenda? TLS Profiles. Sarah, would you like a clicky thing? Woohoo, have a clicky thing.
Oh,
Right, thank you. So yeah, this is a short update on the profiles draft. So this draft covers usage profiles for clients to authenticate servers, and it also discusses the mechanisms to do the authentication. As Warren said, the working group last call started way back on October 6th of this. There was a little bit of review during that time. Thank you to those people. It had to be extended because we didn't get enough review. Some others pitched in after that. Thank you to them. However, it's still sat in working group last call because the feeling is it still needs a bit more feedback to progress it forward.
yes.
So the latest version is the 07 version that went in just before the deadline. It does have a moderate restructure compared to the version that started working group last call, and that's to clarify its position on how SPKI pinning is done and how it relates to the definition of that in the earlier DNS over TLS document. There's a couple of issues that are still hanging around on the mailing list. They're not huge. I'll just touch on them here. They're both just to do with drilling down right into the specifics of how we are going to define opportunistic encryption for DNS over TLS or DTLS. One of those questions, the draft currently says that clients using opportunistic privacy should try for the best case and may fall back. And the query was, shouldn't that be a must? Shouldn't you make clients go for the best option they can get? The draft has the upper text in should, and the question on the list was, why isn't that a must? The answer was, the draft is written this way to leave clients some flexibility because, for example, if they are configured with many upstream recursors, what that would force them to do is try every single one of them to get an authenticated connection before it could actually do DNS service. And so if we're going to go down the must route, we probably need to provide a little more advice about probing in parallel as opposed to doing it in serial and taking the latency hit. It would be really good to get feedback on which of these directions the working group would prefer. The second question is that the way the draft is currently written, it allows for all the possible outcomes of opportunistic as described in the opportunistic RFC, which is 7354. So there is a paragraph in that draft that says opportunistic clients may hard fail. And essentially it says if they believe there's a really good reason they should be able to authenticate. So for example, if a server has advertised credentials and it has them, it allows for the possibility of hard failure. So this is enumerated in the draft. Again, the question was, is that really valuable in a DNS context? Or is it just much simpler to keep this simple, take the hard failure out and say opportunistic clients always go back to clear text to get service, because people who choose this profile really want to get DNS responses. One small case that I had sort of seen that paragraph allowed was, for example, I'm an opportunistic client, I have credentials, I talk to a server, I authenticate, I do 100 connections and they all authenticate, and then one stops, the next one, the authentication fails. So that's an indication something's wrong. As a client, I might decide to act on that and not continue with service. Although the flip side of that is, well, it could just be a certificate expired or something went wrong. I'm opportunistic, I should carry on anyway. So again, feedback on whether that hard fail really makes sense for DNS would be great. Just to reiterate, there is an implementation of this draft in Stubby, which is the client daemon mode of GetDNS, which has DNS over TLS. What's implemented in that is the option to pick either a strict or an opportunistic profile. And you can also configure a name or an SPKI pin set as the basis for authentication. So lastly, apologies, couldn't resist. All the other protocols did it, so and DNS didn't. But seriously, what I really think we would like to do today is get some consensus on moving the draft forward. It's really the last big piece left in terms of the recursive to stub picture, and it's slightly stalled at the moment. So if we could possibly even get volunteers from the room to commit to reviewing this, that would be great, because I think we need to try and define an endpoint for the last call and how to move that forward. So that's the request to the working group today. Thank you. That's it. That's everything. Thanks.
Questions, comments on either of the questions?
Stefan Bartsmeyer. Regarding the choice of must should, I think that it's not too big a problem because it does not create problem for interoperability, because in all cases it's only local policy decision. For instance, for the example of hard fail, I mean, if someone is really paranoid and wants to hard fail rather than to send anything clear, they will do it no matter what we put in the draft. So actually the must should here in that case are not necessary for interoperability. They are advice that we give. So what we could do is just to say, okay, here are the possible choices, here are the consequences. For instance, the consequence of strict is you may not have any DNS service in that case. A consequence of opportunistic is you may be in the queue and be exposed, etc. And so we should not, in my opinion, argue too much about must and should in this case, because there are no interoperability consequences. So don't worry, be happy, etc.
Paul Hoffman, doing things in reverse. I have reviewed it.
Yes.
I will, but you have a couple of open questions that I think I'm the cause of some of them. So I promise to re-review it.
Right.
If other people will review it, and I won't do it if you don't. On the two questions, I think on the must-should question,
That one.
this is only about opportunistic, and I think you've already done a good enough job in the earlier sections on telling people how to choose between strict and opportunistic. So an opportunistic, someone doing opportunistic who wants to be strict-like, didn't understand the earlier text. They should be strict. So your example of, actually, this is on the next one. So I think the current one's fine. On the going to clear text, your example of, well, what if they've connected 100 times and now they notice this? They're not really being opportunistic if in fact they're noticing this and they're logging this. They really are they're acting like they're strict. They should be choosing the strict profile. And again, I think you did that fine before. So I think these two questions are sort of for people who are choosing opportunistic, but they didn't understand it. So in this case, I would absolutely say it should fall back to clear text. There's absolutely no reason to fall, if you've chosen opportunistic, not to fall back to clear text. We don't have an indicator for them. Even if someone had an indicator, if someone's paying it, if the human or the system is paying attention to the indicator, they probably wanted to be strict.
Right.
So I believe both of these are be liberal because we're talking opportunistic, not only because we've defined strict, but we've also told people how to choose between them.
So you're suggesting leave that as a should and remove hard fail as an option?
Absolutely.
Okay, understood.
Hi, this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore. So I think the scenario that you described, Sarah, that says I make the connection for 100 times and then at that point suddenly something fails. I think you're describing a client that maybe learns to move from opportunistic to strict or something like that, right? That may not be a that may not be a purely opportunistic profile, right? The two profiles that we provided are sort of amnesiac, right? We said this is a mode you can operate in and this is another mode you can operate in, and it doesn't include any idea of like shifting modes over time or anything like that. If we wanted to define some kind of sensible policy for how you could learn or latch or from one to the other or something like that, I think that would be a separate discussion. So I'm fine with saying opportunistic mode is opportunistic and going with what Paul said. And then if we wanted to find something that like is a cleverer, more stateful way of being, then we could do that as a separate draft.
So I'm hearing that hard fail is toast for this draft.
Dan York, I would just note that you're actually right there. That's, for the record, that's 7435 is the...
I'm really good at typos in RFC numbers. Thank you. So
Okay.
I'm gonna pester. Are there any volunteers to review?
So yeah, please offer to review. So Stefan, Alexander, who's writing these down? Do you have a pen?
Yep.
There are many people in the front of the room. Who else?
Please.
Stefan
Pretty
and
please.
John.
John.
Oh,
So we're not going to let anyone leave the room until we have at least another, 5
yeah,
volunteers?
Stuart.
John, thank you. Oh, and Stuart, Cheshire, thank you. And that looks like an Andrew in the back, AJS.
So a way to think about this is if you participated in the 73, 54, or 45 discussion, about trying to define opportunistic, you absolutely should be reviewing this document, because if you had an opinion then, this is the best way to know whether your opinion was valid.
Actually, I'm sure your opinion was valid. This is the best way to prove that your opinion was valid.
Okay.
I see a Matt Poundset over there who hasn't offered to review yet.
Ooh.
Just write him down. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can make up names, right? If we...
Yeah, I'll just write names down and put people on the list. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Last chance for the wonderful opportunity to volunteer to review the draft. It's a nice draft.
No.
Yes.
It's opportunistic volunteering. It's very, yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And next, EDNSO padding profiles.
You get the clicky thing.
Cool, clicky things, yeah. Thanks, everyone. So this is about the draft that I sent in. It's a individual submission draft, Meyerhofer DPRIVE betting profiles. I sent it in like right before the deadline, so I understand if probably not too many people have read it. So short recap, what's EDNS Europe betting all about? Even with encrypted DNS, there's the probability that you might be able to gather some kind of information based on the size of the encrypted packages. So there's a size-based correlation side channel attack on encrypted DNS. So the idea was then to conceal the original message size by padding it in some way. And so what we did, we published RFC 7830 in May this year, which has an EDNS 0 option that essentially has just a certain length of craft added to the package, preferable 0 bytes. In that draft, in that RFC, however, there's there was deliberately no specification of the padding length because we found that it would be easier to specify the option right away and talking about the actual application of that option at a later point in time. So actually, there was ongoing implementation work. I have listed a couple of the implementations on that page. I hope it's up to date. If you don't find your implementation on there, shoot me an email. And multiple implementers actually approached me and said, so what's the right padding length do I use? In what way do I pad? So there was no text available regarding the possible strategies. And even further, there is no text available about the quality of a certain strategy. How do we actually measure the quality of a certain strategy in which we pad? Even more interestingly, is there a single best strategy? Is there the pony that we all want? And we believe that this is the wrong spot for too much creativity. So we think that you can do a lot of things wrong, and we need implementer guidance. So I created a strawman proposal. That's actually a very short draft. It's not fully baked. That contains a couple of options. So the most obvious option is you simply do no padding, which obviously doesn't improve the situation at all. You can do fixed length padding, which obviously is easily discoverable by a single packet, so it doesn't improve the situation as well. You can do pad the packet, the message to certain block lengths. You can choose which block lengths you want to pad. It seems like most people either go for 64 or 128 bytes at the current point in time. You can, of course, do random length padding. So you use a uniformly distributed size of paddings that you spread out across all your packets. And you can also randomize the block lengths you pad. So there are probably a couple of more strategies. And it sort of talks a little bit about the pros and cons for each profile or strategy. So I received a couple of comments around good. It looks like a great start. I did a clarification of one strategy. I received comments that there might be more strategies. For example, what we call the full Monty strategy, which is pad each message to the absolute limit of the message size. And so I had the impression that it would be interesting to the working group, and moving forward would be a good thing. So the most exciting thing this week, we had a hallway discussion yesterday that was really great. It was like about an hour. And what we find out is there is actually ongoing research by a couple of people on the quality estimation of that strategies. So Daniel has some data that he's going to look at. Sarah said she probably would be able to get some research papers even in. And we also found out, I need to change it in the draft, that padding shouldn't consider TML, TBD, the TCP message length 2-byte prefix. We actually didn't know what the correct description of that was, but UDP and TCP messages differ by a length of 2, and we shouldn't consider that for padding because there is a certain use case that would make it discoverable. And also, we were concerned about client fingerprinting. So if a client follows a specific padding strategy, then it would be possible to fingerprint a client based on its padding behavior. So that's not a good thing. And a single golden strategy that we can come up with would prevent this. We also found out that we might need to consider future EDNS options, especially on the query side, because this might change the query size of messages, and we need to be future-proof on that. And so regarding which strategy is the best, we probably found a formula that is like it's privacy gain versus bandwidth and processing costs. So we need to look into that. So a question, what are the next steps? So hopefully more research is coming in soon. So we're going to look at some data that we received from recursive DNS operators. I'm talking with my recursive DNS operators at a local university as well. And more like the questions that I'm sort of like channeling you guys, is this a problem that the working group thinks A exists and B, it should be addressed, and yada yada. The next logical step is this document actually something that we can adopt as a boilerplate without having a red face for this working group? So that's it. I had 5 minutes. And comments, questions? How many people actually read the draft or the discussion around it?
Oh yeah, we were going to ask that, but
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I get like a half dozen.
Yeah.
Eric Klein, I'm hoping you'll permit me a very naive question. Where or which of the ones described would you say, or what are the advantages or disadvantages specifically of just padding to say MSS?
Well, I think it's a resource question. If you have a mobile client maybe, and you're maybe concerned about padding each and every message to the full Monty length of what we have, but that's something that we need to research. Yeah, what's the real impact? For example, we said we can probably pad each query to 256 bytes, and no query is larger than like 120 or something.
Or padding to 1280 MTU kind of thing, just sort of
yeah.
padding to
Something like
constant
that.
size message.
As I said, there are probably more strategies, and we need to describe them. The question is whether we want to like have the draft become bigger over time with all the strategies, and then finally like compact it again to the one strategy we came up with. It's a good one. So it's a question of what's the strategy for the draft.
I wasn't offering it as a suggestion. I have no idea if it's a good idea or a bad idea.
Sure.
I just meant
Yeah.
Yep, just padding to a fixed like
Theoretically, from a
MSS or MTU.
From a privacy perspective, padding each and every message to the absolute maximum of the.
Yeah, I mean, Quick sort of does that too. I think at the moment, right? The initial Quick exchanges, I think they pad it out to be guaranteed, among other things, to make sure that there aren't any path MTU problems. But like, you just pad to TCP MSS or something.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you.
Paul Hoffman, I have concern, not like researched concern, about some of this for two reasons. One is I believe that the privacy you're trying to get is over the name itself, the length of the name, or the length of the name. But it ignores the fact that there's going to be other EDNS0 options possibly to it. So if you say pad to 100 bytes, which seems like enough for most domain names, is that 100 bytes including the EDNS0 that was already that, you know, that the other EDNS0 options are not? And if it is including the other EDNS0 options, then this one has to be added last, et cetera. You now have introduced a processing thing. I think that if you are focused on just, we're trying to add length privacy to the domain name, that in fact, a number you know, if we figure out normal domain name sizes and add some to that, like if we look at those sort of the long tail, knowing that we're going to miss some of them, and so we're going to add 0 padding or, you know, obvious padding to some of them, but get 95% in, I think that'll be okay, and I don't think it's going to be a lot of characters. I think we're really talking 50 or something like that. So maximum, I think, is a really bad idea for many reasons. Dan, you're plugged in?
Yeah.
It's not that early in the morning. You know, so if the problem statement is it's just the length of the name, do a little bit of research on name lengths. Don't do ridiculous ones, and I think we'll be fine because we won't be adding that much.
Yeah, a couple of things to that. So first, what the current implementations work in a way that they add padding as the last option after all the other EDNS0 options have been added.
Yep.
And all the implementations I'm aware of do padding to a certain block length, 64.
Something, yeah, something.
So, and regarding coming back to your question about, is it just to conceal the name itself, the QName, or something else? My understanding from the academic work in that area is that the suspicion is that the whole length of the packet, including the corresponding response, is being used to fingerprint the name. So it doesn't just help to conceal the length of the name itself. It's the combination of the original message lengths and the response lengths. So, so it's like the whole thing. That gives you sort of like a space of, it's a two-dimensional matrix of query lengths and response lengths. And once you got like only 3 packets in that bin, yeah, and you see such a combination coming in, you can like guess between 3 names. Yeah. And it gets even worse looking at the whole traffic of recursor, because they have like collateral DNS queries going in.
Then you should say, if you're using this, you really should do it last.
I think that's in 7830, but I need to look it up.
Okay, I
think that
don't
says
remember
that
it from there. So.
DNS Euro padding must be the last option to apply.
Okay.
Sarah Dickinson. I just wanted to express support for this draft. I've sat in 4 hackathons where different people have tried to implement this, and every single time they've sat there and said, how am I supposed to do this? It's a real problem, and I'd also like to see it move forward quickly, because the sooner we have the same mechanism across the implementations, the more effective this technique is going to be. So I'm willing to review and commit text to it.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks.
Alison Mankin. I also, obviously very much support the draft. I am really glad the question about the golden standard surfaced, because when you go to various gatherings of privacy researchers, it's often the case that you've done everything right, and then a pattern from the DNS support gives away what you are. Okay. And I think it's important to try to be very indistinguishable in that front, and also remember that people may want to use agreed upon ports such that it's not distinguishable that it's DNS. So facilitating that may be a piece that isn't in the draft at this point.
Okay, thanks for the comment. Yeah, it's nice.
This is DKG. As someone who's done implementations of padding, thank you very much for advancing this. I would be really happy if the working group would consider this for adoption, and I do also offer to review.
Thanks, Daniel.
I want to see this advance, because I think if people can contribute as this draft is under discussion, if they have new padding policies like what came up earlier about TCP MSS, I would love to see those contributions happen on the list. I don't have a specific preference because I don't have the data right now, but we're working on getting the data, and hopefully we can have something that's published that compares things. So if you have a proposal, we might have a framework to be able to test that proposal, but you got to let us know what the padding mechanism is. So gathering data and trying to do research right now, and I would love to have us have a concrete recommendation.
John Levine, I'm sort of agreeing with Dan here. I totally endorse this draft in concept. My concern about the details is that there's too many options.
Right.
And
right.
I'm wondering whether if people are really vigorously doing research, could we park it long enough to see if there's some of them with some of the options we could throw out and give us ideally only 1 or 2 options.
So
go ahead.
So as a quick show of hands, who all has read this document? Who all has read the document? Okay. Let's try and get an idea on. We'll do a quick hum on a call for adoption. It sounds as though people who support it fairly strongly. So we'll have to do this on list as well, but we'll try and keep it really short. And a reminder to people to please comment on the list when we do an on list call for adoption. So we'll do a hum first for those who think we should adopt this document, and then another one for those who think we should not adopt this document. So people who think we should adopt this document, please hum now.
And multiple hums in the chat room.
Okay. People who think we should not adopt this document, please hum now. Great. For the minute taker, there was a lot of support for us adopting this. We will do it on list, but I'm assuming this will be adopted. So if people can also please start providing feedback, so it can be incorporated as when, etc. That would be great.
Yeah, look for a call for adoption probably this afternoon. How's that? To come on the list. We're not going to waste time.
Yep.
So.
And yeah, when the call for adoption happens, please actually review the document. It's only 6 pages long, and as you know, the first many pages are always boilerplate and should, must, etc. It's short.
I fear it's going to grow, but as I said, we can hopefully shrink it again.
You like them. You write short documents. It's great, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let me just double check. That was all of the primary set.
That was the primary set.
Okay, so that was the primary set of things. There's been sort of some push to have more of a sort of different style of working group meetings. So we're going to be experimenting with sort of a BOF style thing here on the phase 2 work. Our charter doesn't actually specify that we can only work on the phase 1 work. But when we started discussing this, we'd always discuss there being phase 1, which is stub to recursive, and then phase 2, which is recursive to auth. So we're going to discuss the phase 2 stuff now. Stefan will be leading this. Yeah, I guess we'll start that, and then we'll just have a general chat. It's going to be much less formal, although this hasn't been a particularly formal meeting so far. So,
speaking of charter, I would also suggest to review the milestones, because now all the milestones have been done.
Mhm.
So we have nothing to do. So unless we want to go back to sleep, we have to find some work. So current state. So as said, the charter said that the primary focus is the link between the stub resolver and the resolver itself. We have already RFC 7858 about stub to resolver authentication, and I hope that profile document will be published as well soon. So basically this is done. Great, congratulations. But the charter also hints that we can work on the resolver to authoritative link. Anyway, we can always re-charter if we think it's important. My proposal is to reuse what we have done with DNS over TLS. I don't really see the point of inventing a new protocol for the resolver to authoritative link. We already have RFC 7858. We should reuse it, or the future DNS over DTLS as well. But this leaves a big issue, which is the one of authentication. If you don't authenticate, if you are completely opportunistic, it's okay. We can start doing resolver to authoritative TLS tomorrow. No, today. Even today. But authentication is, of course, a big deal. The problem is quite different from the stub to resolver problem, because in the stub to resolver, you have very few servers. Typically, you have a static configuration for a few resolvers that you trust, and you have a TLS link with them. You can even have a static key. Which is okay. I mean, static key pinning is okay for this link. But in the resolver to authoritative, the resolver do not talk to a few machines that it knows about. It talks to hundreds, thousands, dozens of thousands of authoritative servers. And in most cases, it does not have a pre-existing relationship with them. So, for instance, a static key in the case of resolver to authoritative is simply out of question. So we need something more dynamic. So there are many possible techniques. In this draft, I tried to make a complete list. The goal of the draft is not to suggest one possible solution, is at this stage just to list all the possible techniques. A few of them, for instance, could be to simply encode the public key of the authoritative server in its name, then reusing delegation as a way to convey authentication information, public key information, which it's already done in DNS script. It's one possible solution. My goal here is not to say that it is the right solution, but just to show that the problem is perfectly tractable. Another possibility is to use ordinary PKIX validation. I mean, in the TLS answer from the authoritative server, you have a certificate, we can validate it, this sort of thing. You can also put the information about the certificate in the DNS itself with DEN. It's a bit tricky because then you have a click-on-egg problem, but it can be solved. And there are also several solutions. I refer to the draft if you want to have the list. And please, if I forgot one possible solution in the draft, send email to the list, pull request, anything. So one of the difficult things is to try to find out how many solutions that we use. I mean, we may decide that we have only one way to authenticate, the right one. We may decide to have 2 and 3, but not, of course, I think in the draft there are 6 possible solutions. It's not realistic to try all of them. And there is a problem because, of course, if they give different results, you have to choose which one was right. So if we decide to have 2 or 3 solutions, we have to decide of the respective priority. So now, concrete things to do. In my opinion, we should try to decide, not today, but on the mailing list, among the solutions in the draft, which one are interesting, realistic? Then, of course, write an internet draft with it. I volunteer for that, by the way. If so, enough people volunteer to be participants, reviewers, etc. That's one of the things I would like to assess, is if there is enough steam in the group to work on this. Maybe we need to update the charter. Well, I'm not really interested in bureaucratic stuff like that, but maybe it's necessary. Why not? And then it's done. So open to discussion now.
You go first, Dan.
And just so folk know, we're going to have this discussion. We also need to negotiate with our AD on what we're going to be doing after this. Potentially getting more deployment experience, etc., is needed first. But
this is DKG. I definitely think we should push for this. I worry about if the question is how much team do we have, and we judge it on the fact that this is the last session on Friday at the IETF. I hope that we adjust for that variable. It would be a real shame to wrap up DPRIVE without trying to address this leg. I'm not going to get into which of the different solutions I think is the right one here, except to say that in addition to, I think, picking a very small number of possible authentication mechanisms, I think we should make sure that we also think concretely about deployment strategy, because we're going to be in a mixed network for a long time, possibly forever, because at the IETF we deal with the curse of the deployed base. But I want to make sure that we think about proposing concrete strategies for recursive resolvers who don't know whether they're talking to a peer that can do this. And if that's the case, we need to make sure that we have a strategy for how to get there. So yes, I think we should do this stuff, and I want to make sure that it also includes implementation guidance that's practical and deployable in a mixed network.
A related implementation problem is that in the future, if this works, a resolver talking to a new authoritative it doesn't know about will have to choose between UDP, TCP, TLS, and DTLS. So certainly it requires some smartness.
Dan York coming in as JabberScribe, relaying from Shane Kerr. He says, I think this is important work and supports adoption. I think the scaling properties of resolver to authoritative may mean that DNS over TLS is non-optimal. I don't know this, but it seems possible, independent of the authentication problem.
Paul Hoffman. So I've talked to some people about this before, earlier than this week, and I said, I was sort of negative on it because I have a big concern about authoritative servers being open to attack on their CPU and memory on opening up too many TLS connections. And the normal response is, well, Google does it and Facebook does it, therefore everyone can do it. And my response has been, well, they get paid to do that, whereas a lot of authoritative servers don't really get paid that much to do things. In this week, though, I talked with DKG, and I actually am now much more sanguine about doing this. I think that there are ways by picking, for instance, maybe TLS 1.3 only, suggesting using elliptic curves and such like that. So I am much more positive that we can probably deploy this without opening authoritative servers who want to do it to easy CPU and memory denial of service attacks. Having said that, one thing I don't really see in your draft much is what we've just been spending time on, which is profiles for strict versus opportunistic. And I would suspect that in the early days and maybe even later, opportunistic will be just fine for a lot of people. And therefore, I agree with what Dan said, that what we should do in whatever document we do is we also specify deployment strategies. And it's perfectly fine, I think, for a recursive operator to be doing this opportunistically, particularly if they're a validating recursive resolver. If all they're doing this for is to get encryption and they don't really care about who I'm talking to because they're going to do DNSSEC validation, that might be sufficient for them. I don't know. I haven't written down the chart with the lines and such like that, but I would suspect opportunistic would actually be just fine as well. So I very much support doing this work. I think that this is a very logical next step. And I agree with you that for doing authentication, we should have a limited number. I don't think it should be just one. But we should have a limited number, because some of the ones that you've proposed, in fact, work together well. So you can do a DNS curve type naming scheme and PKICs. There's no reason not to. And now that we're in a world where it's fairly easy to get TLS certs, it may be that one or the other would be just fine. So that is, we can have both of those, and someone might combine them.
It's true that the profile are not in the current draft, because there is one more difference between a stub to resolver and resolver to authoritative. It's in the second case, it's much more difficult to report authentication problem to the users. In the first case, you can imagine stubby popping up a message saying there was not authentication or authentication failed, something like that. In the resolver to authoritative, it's no longer possible. So for instance, strict is much more dangerous.
Yeah, yes, I agree. The strict is more dangerous, and therefore I don't want us to insist on authentication. Although I certainly want us to allow it, because I can imagine a world where a recursive operator would say, "I'm going to require TLS authentication if the answers are not DNSSEC signed."
In principle, I'm Olar Guimason from Cloudflare. In principle, I support a work like this, but there are certain serious scaling issues that we need to think about. When you send the question to an authoritative server, it may be serving up hundreds of views, or you may have on your network hundreds of named authoritative servers. And we don't necessarily want every recursor farm to have a TLS connection to every combination of IP addresses between the two of them. So any protocol that is really going to scale in this world is going to need some kind of a tunneling mechanism, in my opinion. So we can tell them somehow over the protocol, any questions for these address ranges, just send them to me and I'll figure out how to get it to you. Almost, I envision this as some kind of a proxy service, not as necessarily a connection directly to the name server, just a trusted entity on my network.
Interesting. Okay. I think Andrew is next, and then Allison. Okay.
I'm Andrew Sullivan. I guess I agree with most of the things that people have said. I looked at the draft, and I think that, but I didn't read it very carefully. And it seems to me that there's an enormous number of subtleties in there that I think the draft actually mentions, but that are maybe not entirely clear to people who have not operated this infrastructure at large scale. So I think that if this working group is going to tackle this, actually, it really does need to change its charter, because I think that the rest of the IETF might be interested in this in a way that they were not interested in the stub to resolver case. And while I think it would be very difficult for somebody to object to that change of charter by getting up in public and saying, no, privacy is a bad thing, because they would be called down, frogs and so on upon them. The possibility, of course, is that if we don't do something about the charter, somebody will come along later if they've got an agenda about this, and they'll complain that they weren't warned, and all the work will go for nothing. So I would encourage us to work out precisely what we were going to do, and then work out the range of things that are in this draft, and some of the things that people have just mentioned about the scope of the problems that are facing us, because it's a bigger piece of work than I think it initially looks like, just because we've already got the model of the stub to resolver. We're all used to thinking of DNS as just sort of messages that are passed around, but the operational realities are very different. Thanks. Oh, and thanks for the draft. It's pretty good.
So I definitely want to give more comments in email on the draft, but I do also appreciate it very much. I just wanted to mention there's a case where you might offer encrypted service to certain authoritatives because they have sensitivities, and have people aware of or be able to be signaled that they can reach those authoritatives over TLS, and it's a kind of a controlled case. It's not the entire global infrastructure, but for example, authoritatives that serve controversial or dissident information zones or things like that. And I even chatted a little bit with Shane about the idea that you could have, like some instances of root which provide this, and you just choose to go to those if you think you need to lash up a safer, more private path all the way. That's not quite the same as making it bulletproof and making it available for the entire global internet. So I don't know whether that's a separate little draft to say we can use this in certain circumstances the way we have it now that could come ahead of solving the problem in the more general case.
One of the consequences of the first method, the DNS curve, DNS curve actually, there is a mistake in the slide. It's actually DNS curve. One of the consequences is that it can be used as a form of signaling. You tell people that they can expect cryptography and privacy from this server, something which you cannot do with RFC 7858 alone. So maybe we should add something more.
Right, have a way to offer that as a service for certain servers that want to try it out. Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea.
Then is also another way to signal that you are ready to do TLS and privacy and like that.
So I guess Makand and then John.
I just wanted to respond to Alison, if that's all right.
Okay.
This proper angle. Alison mentioned the root servers. And if you're doing QNAME minimization, there may be an argument to say you don't really need privacy at the root. I'm not sure, but I'm just putting it out there.
Good question.
Makand?
Hello, this is Mukund from ISC. So stop to resolver communications have settled on TLS over TCP, and this seems fairly good for stop to resolver communications. I am worried and I wonder if TLS over TCP is the right approach for resolver to authoritative server communications. There are several round trips in establishing such a session, and when a resolver operates, basically there are more than one lookup. Usually, when you're trying to look up some domain, DNS is at the head of everything. So this adds to the turnaround time. For example, if you're establishing a HTTPS session to a web server, you first do the DNS lookup, and only then you can start a connection, TCP connection, and then a TLS session over that for HTTP. But before that, you have to have your domain looked up, your address looked up for that web server, and if that is going to take a lot of time, then that adds to the turnaround time of the entire basically HTTP connection. Now, where I am in the world, for a typical name server, I get about 300 milliseconds RTT. So with a UDP lookup, plain UDP lookup over DNS, so that takes 300 milliseconds. If I add TCP with a three-way handshake, let's not consider fast open right now. We are still in olden times. You have at least 2 round trips for that, and then you establish a TLS session over that. That takes even more time, even more round trips. That is for one fetch from a recursive resolver to an authoritative server. You may have multiple fetches to deal with, so each fetch may take more than 1 second, and you're basically looking up for several seconds, even before you actually do, or even before the application is able to connect to whatever address it's trying to connect to. So and there are other methods. My colleague Vitol presented one a couple of IETFs ago in Yokohama. And this is based similar to the DJB method, DNS curve. So which basically lets you use one round trip and UDP to get a encrypted connection to an authoritative server from a recursive resolver. So I think we should evaluate other approaches empirically, and especially TLS itself. We should evaluate it empirically to see how well it will work before we settle on it. Thank you.
And just to be clear, this discussion is mainly the, do we want to move on to the phase 2 work? not specifically, Stefan's document or any particular one of the specific solutions. The reason that we split it up into phase 1 and phase 2 is because we realized phase 2 was a lot harder. The recursive to auth, has a lot more scaling issues, a lot more connections. So, low, you need to make sure the latency is low, etc.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry. I just looked at the draft, which basically starts with key establishment for TLS over TCP, or DNS over TLS. That's what the draft says, and so that's where it came in.
Sure. Fair enough.
Yeah, but certainly, I agree, Warren, but certainly it's important to get an idea of the amount of work that we have to do and the choice we have to make. And this one is extremely important because I took for granted that we will reuse DNS over TLS. It seemed obvious. Apparently, not everyone agrees, so this is certainly a very important discussion and decision.
Okay. Jim, and then the gentleman in the back, and then DKG.
Yeah. Jim Reed speaking for myself. Stefan, I think the draft's a very good idea of giving us all food for thought. And Warren, I do think this is something that the group should be working on and take things forward. One thing I would say though is we've got to also think very, very carefully. We take this thing on about the deployment plans that DKG was mentioning before. And I'm particularly concerned about if we're going to have some sort of secure mechanism for securing the path between a stub and a resolving server, and then doing another one to secure the path from the resolving server to the authoritative servers. I think that's going to get very ugly if we have two separate mechanisms. It'd be nice if there was one overarching one that could apply in both circumstances. I appreciate that's very, very difficult. And there's also nasty, horrible sorts of scaling issues in there. It probably even can't be done. But if we are going to do this work, I think it'd be useful to try to think about doing it in a way which would be as clean and as simple as possible. We've got far too many potential paths here for doing the security, for securing these communication paths already. I don't think we should be adopting a Swiss Army penknife approach and having multiple approaches to it. Got to keep it clean and simple.
Hi, my name's Tim Shepard, and actually first I'd like to thank you all for the wonderful tutorial on Sunday afternoon. That was amazing. I had paid no attention to this working group before Sunday afternoon, and that was a very well done tutorial, and that's why I got interested to come this afternoon. I think while encrypting the query and the reply from the stub to the resolver seems to solve the problem of providing privacy, I think there's a deeper problem that the query from the resolver to the authoritative, you can encrypt the query that comes after the IP header and whatever other header, but the IP header has in it the IP address of the authoritative server that it's going to. And oh boy, it seems to me that that reveals a lot about what name you might be looking up. But perhaps depending on what resolver you're using, maybe it doesn't identify what user looked it up or something, but there's something complicated and subtle about what problem are you trying to solve to provide privacy in the traffic that flows between the resolver and the authoritative. I mean, there are a lot of authoritative servers in the world that serve up maybe only one zone, and well, obviously they were trying to look up a name in that zone. And then actually the root, I think, what is the authority that creates new TLDs? Like companies are ICANN or IANA? IANA or ICANN, but I don't know how the process works, but they're creating lots of new top-level domains. There's going to be an awful lot of stuff in the root. And I guess maybe if you're looking up one of those, then encrypting your communication to the root does in fact provide some privacy. But anyway, I just thought I'd actually, before you figure out how to encrypt and worrying about scale, I think you actually have to stop for a moment, step back, and think about what problems are you trying to solve, and maybe which problems that you might like to solve are insoluble, etc., and think carefully about that. That's just a thought.
So but regarding the risk of communication between the resolver and the authoritative, I believe it is well covered in RFC 7626, which is not limited to the stub to resolver. And there is a lot of discussion about this exact issue you were talking about. Is the fact that you talk to this authoritative server enough information to deduce what's going on? Today the answer is no, because unfortunately, there is a big concentration of DNS authoritative service to some big providers. When I see someone talking with Dyn, for instance, it gives me very little information because they host, 200,000 domains or something like that. So it's today, it's not really a problem. Now, I would like to reply about John's question about QNAME minimization. It depends on at what level you are. For instance, when you talk to the root, the fact that you ask .com or .org means nothing because everyone talks to is interested in .com or .org. If you query about .kp, it may be more revealing because few people do. And then the lower you are in the tree, the most revealing it is. Talking to the .org name server means absolutely nothing, but querying them for alcoholicsanonymous.org is more revealing. And same thing at the third level. So in a one way, the root is a special case because most of the time it doesn't really matter. But all the other authoritative servers can be subject to surveillance, sniffing, etc.
I think it was DKG, then Dan, then my eyes aren't good enough to see past the first
So
line.
this is DKG. So I fully agree with Tim that we do also need to be thinking about the sort of traffic analysis concerns. And I also agree with Stefan that, depending on the deployment of the network, that may not be an issue for certain queries. I recommend if anyone's interested in reading that kind of details about that kind of research, Haya Schulman has a paper called Pretty Bad Privacy: The Perils of DNS Encryption, which talks about a lot of these additional channels, and that we do need to be thinking about those, and hopefully we can think about them in this group as well. But we will, no matter what, we will still need transport encryption, regardless of how we address the other channels. To Allison's point about saying that, well, maybe you could have some authoritatives that, you will always do strong crypto because that's where you look up the dangerous stuff. That worries me a lot. That's an easy target for censorship. We'll just block the sketchy authoritatives and then no one will be able to get to the dangerous stuff. So I'm not so sure that that's the outcome that we should be aiming for. And if we find ourselves heading in that direction, I'd like to step back. And thirdly, and this is my last point here, I wanted to call out something that Paul said that I think is worth noting. He sort of mentioned in passing that we could profile the recursive to authoritative link. That is TLS profiles. So the performance concerns are very real. Thank you for raising them. But with TLS, by the time we get around to getting this specified, fingers crossed here, don't make me a liar, but TLS 1.3 will exist. Sorry. TLS 1.3 combined with TCP fast open gives you actually a one round, like the first, basically you get data in the first packet. It's not forward secure. There's a bunch of weird other properties that you get from it, but it actually starts to look much more similar in performance characteristics to a UDP query. At the very least, if you've made one additional, maybe the first time you ever talk to that server, you have to cache a little bit of data as a client. But once you do, you can then do basically like one-shot requests, get a one-shot answer back. So I'm not saying, so if we can profile the TLS bits, by the time this thing is released, we can say, if you're going to deploy this stuff, you need to deploy it with a modern TLS stack. Then we have an opportunity to take advantage of all of these additional performance tuning characteristics that we've got right now. Looks like that there's no cable on that mic.
Hello, it's Mukun again. The first time is also important. In a lot of cases, resolvers are moving closer and closer to actual hosts that use them. For example, systemd is getting a resolver. It may be funny, but systemd has a resolver.
Systemd resolver is a stub, though. It's only a forwarder.
Okay, in any case, you want to be as close as possible to your validating resolver because most applications don't validate. Although DNSSEC allows end-to-end validation, most applications basically trust whatever the resolver gives them. So you want your validating resolver to be as close to you as possible, and that's the general movement of resolvers as well. People are using public resolvers less and less, and getting resolvers closer and closer to their hosts, whatever you're using them. So in a lot of cases, you will have resolvers that don't have an existing trust relationship or anything, existing cookie or whatever with a remote server. So there will always be this thing about first time use all the time. If for any, as an example, a typical use case is somebody wakes up in the morning, goes to Reddit or Hacker News, opens a bunch of websites. Those are all new name servers. Lot of them are known URLs, but a lot of them are random URLs. You want them to open up as soon as possible. You don't want to wait looking up hostname.
I agree with you. And sorry, I'm about to sit down. I just want to point out that we may need as a community to clarify the distinction between having a local validating resolver that just does the validation and does forwarding to a gathering resolver, right? So that's actually what the systemd implementation is doing. And I totally agree with you that you want your validating resolver as close to you as possible because you want it inside your trust boundary. But that may not be the thing that does the recursive work, right? You have your validating resolver that talks as a forwarder to a gathering resolver. Anyway, as a community, we should be documenting this. And I would love to work with you on that if you want to do that.
We should be trying to basically settle on a solution that works in every case, not just on specific cases. If I run a caching resolver by myself, I want it to perform well as well.
So it's Dan York. I wanted to just kind of say, I want to bring this back to, I think you're asking us, right? Do we want to do this work?
Does the working group have interest in continuing this?
And the
Should
answer
we go to sleep and,
Right. Well, I just want to say, I think from a process point of view, we're getting a lot of engineering of solutions at the mics, but I think the solution what you're looking for from us is, do we want to do that? I mean, and while I'm here, I will say, yes, I think this is worthwhile to consider. I have a number of concerns, some of which have been raised here by others here, but I think it's worth exploring because if we are looking at how we truly have a trusted DNS infrastructure, this is one place where we are exposing information in ways that need to be looked at. What the solution is, I looked at the draft and, I have opinions about various different ones in there, but I think it's worth having this group look at that to see what could be there. And I would echo the comments a couple of people made. Deployability will definitely be something we need to be thinking about. But yes, let's do it.
So yeah, thank you. Towards the very end of this, we've still got some time. We're planning on having a hum for yes, the working group wants to carry on working on this. We might discover it's too hard, but at least we should investigate it. 2, nope, we should go to sleep for a year or so and then maybe discuss this all again. Or 3, nope, this is way too hard. Don't bother. It's a stupid idea. Give up. And, we'll have that thing and then we'll chat with our AD and see what he wants us to do.
Sarah Dickinson, I just wanted to feed into the problem statement in terms of future-proofing the DNS. I mean, nobody really anticipated the way individuals' data was going to be added into eDNS client subnet options and exposed recursive to authoritative. And I don't think we as a community can anticipate future uses of that option to expose personal data. So I think that's a really solid reason to be doing this work now rather than going to sleep.
Anyone else? This is the last session on Friday, so I guess we're the only thing that's standing between you and whatever else you want to do. So does our AD have any thoughts, questions first, or shall we try this hum? Hum?
Okay.
Do you have a? Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have a 3-way hum. First is going to be yes, the working group wants to continue working on this and, discussing stuff. And then we'll be able to figure out if it's too hard to actually accomplish or not. Oliver?
Oliver Guðmundsson, Cloudflare. Quick question. When you say this, do you mean solution or figure out what the problem is?
Both. Better defining what exactly we're trying to protect from recursive to auth. Basically, the whole recursive to auth side. What exactly needs to be protected? Does everything need to be protected or only, high value things? Is there a signaling thing? And then hopefully once we've discovered what the problem is, work on a solution. So both sides. Yeah. The second part of the second of the 3 hums will be, nope, we should just go back to sleep for a while and maybe in a year or 2 we'll wake up again and then start talking about that once we have some deployment experience. And then the third option will be, nope, this is really a stupid idea. It's harmful to the internet. Let's not do it. Let's not discuss it. Let's all go home and go shopping. So they're somewhat different. 2 is we're planning on probably waking up again. We're sort of a zombie, right? We're going to hiatus.
The idea
3 is,
being,
God, no, never touch this. Worst idea ever.
The idea being that we don't have a lot of operational experience yet with the stub to recurse, we haven't seen that data yet. And as an operational person, that makes me a little nervous. I feel that it's actually going to work and it's going to scale at that level, but until I think we see that, we're making guesses as to what we're doing in the next step, and that has me just a little bit concerned. Doesn't mean I want to stop. It just means we want to make sure we're sort of looking at the problem in several different ways.
And I suspect this is a hard problem, and so by the time we get anywhere near solving it, we should have some deployment experience. But Joel has.
He's standing up.
Joel Yeagley, to summon the magic 8-ball, those are answer unclear, ask again. That's number 2, and signs point to no. Is number 3.
One of them we close down, the other one we get to sleep. But yeah. Okay, so let's do this. People who think that they would like to continue discussing this so we can figure out, what all the problem is, if it is actually addressable, etc., please hum now.
And multiple hums, 3 hums in the chat room.
Sweet. If you think that we should go to sleep for a year or so and then, maybe discuss this then, basically the same set of questions then, please hum now. Okay, that was much less than for the first hum. People who think that this is a bad idea, we should close down the working group as soon as we finish the current documents and never touch this ever again, please hum now. Okay, so for the scribes, strong hum for us should probably stay around.
Light hum.
Light hum for we should just go to sleep and wake up in a year or two and look at it then. And we didn't hear a hum for nope, all done.
Yep.
Shut down.
It's hard work.
So we will need to chat with our AD and figure out what all's happening. Yeah. You've been warned.
It hates me. I'd like to see more discussion on the mailing list, please.
Yeah.
Before we get to further discussions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. So yep, hopefully more discussion on the mailing list. I'm guessing people are tired and that more discussion will be a couple of days before it starts up again. However, I should point out many people have a long flight home. So please review the profiles document and provide feedback. Might as well use the plane time for something useful, not just watching bad movies. Please also review the EDNS profiles document.
The padding profile.
The padding profiles document, not the other profiles document, and provide feedback on if we should adopt it. What are we missing? Any last other things?
No.
Going once?
I want to say welcome to any new people who showed up, like Tim and others who showed up because of the tutorial. That's great. We're actually nice people. So please, I think we are.
Woohoo!
Yep. So
and I get to press the red button, even though there's nobody in the queue, because red button. Okay, done.
Done. Thank you all. Have a safe flight home.
We don't care where you go, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
Oh, blue sheets. If you haven't signed the blue sheets, there's one up here. If somebody else has the other blue sheet, please give it to us. You can't sell it on eBay. They don't really sell very well.
The secretary gets mad if you try to sell them. So. What's that? There you go.
I won't do that. It's long meeting.
Greetings, sir. How are you doing?